everyone. I'm getting this out a little later than I intended, but things got a little crazy after Dynamite. But I'm filming it now, and this is my reaction and review to the latest episode of Dark Side of the Ring, which focused on the Brawl for All. And I thought once again it was overall a very good episode. Left a couple details out, but overall very well done, very well told version of the story. And when I first heard they were doing the Brawl for All, I thought that was an odd choice because I thought in my mind, I'm like, okay, yeah, the Brawl for All was stupid, and yeah, we all kind of think of it as this notorious bad idea right in the middle of one of the hottest periods in wrestling. Like, you think of Raw in 1998, that was when Raw was can't miss TV. And right in the middle of it, they've got this dog shit. So that kind of makes it stand out even more that it was happened during a period where television for wrestling was just red fucking hot. Um, but I had a hard time initially going like, okay, when I think of the dark stories of pro wrestling, I think of like the Von Erich family and the Benoit situation and all the other episodes that are going to be told. The New Jack episode last week was yeah. Yeah. And Brawl for All didn't jump out to me as one to do, but the way they constructed the story, I was like, you know what? Yeah, it is a little messed up that they would basically ask guys to volunteer for a shoot competition that they are ill prepared for, and a lot of guys were willing to do it just for a little bit of extra money and fame and notoriety. And the end result was a bunch of guys getting hurt, and the guy who ultimately won the tournament getting humiliated at WrestleMania. So it is kind of like this weird tragedy that just kept on giving. Like, people kept getting hurt, and guys' reputations got ruined, and then you had the fiasco that happened at WrestleMania. So I looking at it through the lens that they constructed the entire episode through, I was like, okay, yeah, it does kind of fit. And I guess I'll start off by talking about the Brawl for All and my original experiences with it back in the day when I first watched it. And again, Jim Cornette said that it's the worst thing that's ever been done in wrestling. It's the stupidest idea that Vince Russo ever had. And I have a hard time, like, admitting that it's the worst thing ever because, I mean, when I think of the worst that ever made it to on-screen television in any wrestling company, you know, you think David Arquette winning the WCW World Title, you think, Katie Vick is a big one for me. I mean, Katie Vick is like the grand poobah of horrible wrestling angles. You think Mae Young giving birth to a hand. You think even a few years after this on Raw, they did the Raw Diva Search, which I thought was like just pure classless television, like just pure and utter trash. And that was a perfect example of like the dying days of the spirit of the Attitude Era, where they kept trying to cling to it before going full on PG, and that was just straight up classless, lowest common denominator garbage. The Diva Search. So I think all the things I just mentioned produced worse TV. The Brawl for All, the appeal of the Brawl for All to, let's say, a television viewer or to any savage-brained individual, which I believe to some degree all of us have kind of that savage part of our brains that like to watch people beat the shit out of each other. You know, whenever there's a fight in the schoolyard, think back to when you were in grade school, whenever there was a fight in the schoolyard, y'all crowd around it. Nobody tries to break it up. You know, they want to watch the goddamn fight. I remember I was in college and somebody stole my friend's PS2. And my friend was like, I know this guy did it. I'm 99.9% sure this guy did it. So he confronted him at the cafeteria one night, and he was holding a handful, like a roll of quarters, and he proceeded to beat the shit out of him. Right there. And it was yeah, and it was funny because he had told people that he was going to do it. So the cafeteria was suspiciously crowded, like more so than usual for the usual like dinner rush. I knew he was gonna do it. Everybody on our floor knew he was gonna do it. We all just knew. I was like, all right, we're gonna see a fucking fight right there at the cafeteria, and no one tried to stop it. We just let it happen and enjoyed the show. So. The appeal of the Brawl for All is the fact that it's like, oh shit, we get to watch people actually beat the shit out of each other. But to me, there's a difference between schoolyard fighting, which happens spontaneously, and is like a personal issue that had been brewing for some time, or somebody said the wrong thing and pissed somebody off, and then you just watch the scrap. Um, when I watch like a competition, I expect it to be between guys that are professionals that have trained for it. And that's the appeal of something like UFC or boxing. I was a big fan of boxing when I was a kid. Mainly because of the Rocky movies, but I remember watching like Mike Tyson fight. I remember when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. It was one of the few times my dad ordered a pay-per-view. He ordered like that fight, and I remember watching it. It's like, oh my god, that's amazing. I remember watching Olympic wrestling, like real wrestling for the first time, and I was like, this shit's brutal. I mean, look at this, it's amazing. And these are pro world-class athletes that are trained to do this, and that's where the Brawl for All really faltered. I remember when they first announced it, and they said they were going to do this thing, and in my mind, I was like, okay, that could be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who wins it, because whoever wins it will probably get a big push. And then the first time I saw it, I was like, are they hitting each other for real? Because I don't remember reading online or anything that the Brawl for All was a shoot, so I was like shocked when I watched it on TV. I was like, are they really hitting each other? What the fuck is going on? And then I go online, and sure enough, there's like, yeah, it's a shoot. They're actually shoot fighting with each other. I'm like, okay, that's a stupid idea for a multitude of reasons, because and no disrespect to the boys that got involved in it, and a lot of them legitimately are tough guys. The Godfather had a reputation, and Bart Gunn, obviously. Bradshaw had a rep. Well, I wonder how much of his reputation was him picking on smaller guys and just being a bully. But a lot of these guys had reputations for being legitimately tough guys. And if you tried to do the Brawl for All today, I can't think of 16 guys on the current roster that could believably compete in such a thing. I think it would be Lesnar, and that might be it. That might be it. Like, Lesnar would storm through the entire thing, because he's the only one that would have any kind of prayer winning any kind of a shoot fight. It speaks to the toughness of the boys back then, that there were enough of them that could have believably filled out the brackets for some kind of a tough man competition. Although, having guys that are trained to pretend to fight for a living all of a sudden go in there and shoot, that is a huge mistake. A huge, huge mistake. And I remember watching it week to week, and I'm like, this is bad. Like, somebody's going to get hurt. And sure enough, people did get hurt. And quite a few guys got hurt. And the Dark Side of the Ring documentary actually highlighted some that I didn't even know about. Like, I didn't know the Godfather got effed up the way he did. He was probably, of all the guys in the Brawl for All, he's probably the one that made out the best of the bunch, because I think he was just starting to develop like his pimp character at around that time. And then when he came back after the Brawl for All, he was able to just go full on into that. And so I think he's the only one that really, like, at least in the WWE, I think he's the only one that really, like, survived. Well, Bradshaw, but Bradshaw took a few years and had to basically completely reinvent himself. But, you look at some of the other guys and they're like Brockus. Brockus is an interesting one because nobody remembers him, and he was a guy that had some vignettes and, was a bodybuilder and had a great look and amounted to absolutely nothing, to the point where almost nobody remembers him. And he gets beat by Savio Vega, I think it was, of all people. Like, I was like, Savio Vega was still there in '98? Jesus, that's insane. Gets beat by him, and that's the last you ever see of Brackus in the WWE. And the Brawl for All was a terrible idea, especially, and this was extensively covered in Dark Side of the Ring. If it was designed for Dr. Death to storm all the way through this thing and win the tournament, it's one of those moments where I wish I was backstage at WWF at the time, and I would have been like, look, guys, I know you all think Dr. Death is the toughest human being on the fucking planet, and I can see why. And that's a reputation I'm sure he has earned. I'm not doubting Dr. Death. I love Dr. Death. But in a shoot, anything can happen. Again, I just referenced the Buster Douglas-Mike Tyson fight. Nobody would have ever expected Buster Douglas to knock out Mike Tyson. Nobody. It would have been insane to think that that was possible, but it happened. If you honestly have designed this tournament for Dr. Death to win, and you're banking on him winning and having a program with Steve Austin down the road, you should make it a work. Because anything can happen in a shoot. And sure enough, he tore his hamstring and got knocked out by Bart Gunn. And that was basically the end of his run in the WWE, and they killed the program with Steve Austin. Now, Russo said something on the documentary that I thought was interesting, where he felt like Dr. Death was past his prime, and to a point, I kind of agree with that. I don't know how well a program with Steve Austin would have gone at that point in time, because Dr. Death, again, I'm not disrespecting Dr. Death, I love the guy, but even when he came in, he felt like kind of a relic of a bygone era, like he felt like an old school wrestler. And in the Attitude Era, that didn't really fit. Like, if he were coming in today, he'd probably have a much easier time fitting in. Because I think the classic old school wrestler type would actually be a breath of fresh air compared to everybody else in there. But I think at the time, like, that felt almost like old school and passe. And I don't think it would have gotten over as well. Just my opinion. And again, that's no disrespect to Dr. Death at all. I love the guy. He won the tag team tournament of my first WCW pay-per-view, which was Great American Bash 92. And I remember I loved him because I thought the name was cool. Like, when I first saw him, I was like, his name is Dr. Death? That's fucking cool. I was easy to impress as a child. But no, it's like, him losing that fight speaks nothing to Dr. Death's toughness or lack thereof. It's just, in a shoot, anything can happen, and that's just how it is. And that level of unpredictability kind of throws any plans you have out the window, because you don't know what's going to happen week to week. I also thought it was interesting that guys like Dan Severn worked the first night and then dropped out of it, which was the smartest decision he ever made. Someone like Ken Shamrock, who probably could have won the thing blindfolded at the time, made the smart choice not to get involved in it, because no. Because, again, anything can go wrong in a shoot. And Shamrock knows that. Like, anything can happen in a shoot. Even though he has a wild advantage over pretty much everybody else that would jump into that thing. Shamrock knew better than to get in there. And even some of the top guys like Undertaker and Austin, I mean, they wouldn't be caught dead in something like that. Because, like, oh, you want to watch my stock instantly drop? Watch me enter a shoot fight competition and get my ass kicked. And, yeah, so conceptually, the Brawl for All, to me, completely goes against everything that wrestling is supposed to be about. Because it's supposed to be about pretending to fight each other, making it look like you're fighting each other, but it's really like ballroom dancing in a sense, where you're cooperating with your dance partner. And to me, the Brawl for All completely throws that out the window. So, Dark Side of the Ring, I thought their presentation was very, very good. The only detail they left out that I thought was odd was they didn't mention, or they kind of skirted around, that Bart Gunn actually did have a wrestling career in Japan after the debacle at WrestleMania 15. He didn't just retire right after that. They almost made it sound like he retired after that. I was like, no, he had runs in New Japan and All Japan, and he did pretty well, all things considered. So, yeah, maybe they skirted the issue there a little bit. But what I really liked was how they told all the little individual stories for the people involved, from Dr. Death, and how JR was related to that, and how he was JR's boy, and our Bruce Pritchard saying that they pulled the names out of a hat, out of a paper bag, and Bart Gunn saying that's bullshit because he got paired up with Bob Holly, who was his tag team partner in the opening round. And it's like, come on, dude, you didn't plan that, really? And I'm willing to give Bruce a half benefit of the doubt. Is like, I think that they probably picked a couple of them. Well, they probably picked the names out of a bag and then rearranged the brackets to some point. It's like, let's switch 1 and 2 a little bit and see how that goes. Because that's a big coincidence that the two tag team partners wound up together in a shoot fight competition. But I liked that they had draws on there. I had not seen draws in years and years and years. And draws is, I think the way the documentary presents it, they were going to make it look like the Brawl for All was what put him in a wheelchair, which is not true. And I thought they were going to present it like that's what happened, but fortunately they did tell his story with D'Lo Brown. They had D'Lo on there, and D'Lo, I mean, who was somebody that I loved. I was a huge mark for D'Lo Brown in like 98, 99. and that match happened. He looked haunted by it, and that to me is one of the best examples, probably the prime example of how things can go horribly wrong in pro wrestling in a match, in a fairly normal match, at the drop of a hat. It just like that, it's over. And a horrible tragedy. I mean, Droz seems to be in good spirits about it, and says he still goes hunting, which I'm like, good for him. Good for him. He's made a really nice life for himself, all things considered. But it is still one of the all great tragedies, and it's probably not enough. There's probably not enough material to cover it in another episode, like its own full episode of Dark Side of the Ring. So it got highlighted here, which I thought was really nice. And again, it's nice to see Droz, and it's nice to see that he's in good spirits. They had the Godfather on there, who is a charming personality, I think. He's a very likable dude, I think. He's a pretty cool cat. And I wish they had gotten Bradshaw on there. I knew that was going to be impossible because of his ties to WWE. Although it is really weird to see WWE footage like all over these episodes of Dark Side of the Ring. I don't know what the deal is there. I'm shocked that they're willing to let them leverage that footage for their docs, but I'm sure WWE gets a payment for it anyway. So, but it would have been nice to have Bradshaw on there because he was the reason that the whole tournament was created in the first place. But I love that they told that story. And the big appeal for me, like I said last week, I said I was looking for this one to be kind of the goofy, funny episode, because it looked like it was going to be Cornette versus Russo, part 845, a feud I will never get sick of. Because it's the greatest backstage rivalry in the history of wrestling, because they clash on like a spiritual, ideological level. Their feud goes beyond like petty bullshit and rumors and he said she said crap. It is their conflict is on a philosophical, ideological level, and that's why it's instantly fascinating to me, and I was glad that it got worked in here because this is the perfect forum for a Cornette Russo meeting of the minds, as it were. And to be honest, I mean, there are times where I say Cornette is out of touch, he's too old school and everything. I mean, I love listening to his rants. I mean, I love listening to the guy talk and rant and rave all day long. I think it's great. But there are times where I do feel he's like really out of touch. However, I also think he's very good at the Wrestling 101 type of stuff and making the stuff make sense. And I think he's got a great mind for that. Jim Ross had a great line. Jim Ross was also on it, which was good to see. And he had a great line where it's Cornette believes in the steak and Russo believes in the sizzle. And I think that's fairly accurate. Cornette's the type of guy, I wouldn't bring him in to kind of sizzle at the product. I would bring him in as maybe like somebody to like help me put the pieces together of the story I'm trying to tell. It's like, look, I want to have this match, but how do I get there? Like, help me get there. And I think I would trust somebody else to come up with like the kind of the sexier elements. But I think the skeleton, I think Cornette could do that pretty well. Russo, like Jim Ross said, he's the sizzle. He's the guy that'll throw wild ideas out there and try to make it interesting and exciting, and whether it makes any sense or not. And that's Vince Russo. And as it says in the documentary, he was basically an outsider brought in to start writing a wrestling show, which I think worked in the late 90s because it did add like a fresh, never-before-seen type of atmosphere to the show that livened everything up. But I think now we're at a point where Russo's ideas are every bit as outdated as Jim Cornette's ever were. He's just as old-fashioned at this point. And I think Russo's kind of been exposed. It's like, oh, you were just an idea guy. You weren't really like this genius mastermind that you led people to believe you were. And when you see that things like the Brawl for All were his idea, it's like, ooh, gee. Maybe you need like wrestling logic once in a while, because I think most wrestling people would have thought, holy shit, you can't have these guys actually shoot fight with each other. That's the stupidest thing ever. And yeah, it's not a smart idea. And again, it probably made for good TV for some people because there is that part of our brains that just loves to watch people beat the shit out of each other. But for real, so it wasn't as like bad as a lot of the other angles and ideas that I'd brought up earlier. But it still like was a horribly misconceived thing, and I love the way that Dark Side of the Ring presented the entire thing. I thought it came off really well. And another thing I really liked was they went into great detail about the Bart Gunn Butterbean match, one of the biggest fiascos in WrestleMania history. And when they signed that match, I was like, "Are you fucking crazy? That is not going to go well at all." And Butterbean, like, I don't look at Butterbean as like a world class boxer like a Muhammad Ali or a Mike Tyson or a Joe Frazier or George Foreman or anything like that. But this is a guy that boxes for real and he's as strong as an ox and is gonna punch Bart Gunn's face off, if given the opportunity. And Bart Gunn, at the end of the day, is a pro wrestler that's trained to pretend to fight and not actually fight for real. He was just the poor unfortunate soul that won that tournament, and which turned out to be a curse more than a blessing. The way things played out. And sure enough, you get to WrestleMania, and I remember watching it like it was yesterday. I was in 8th grade at that point. I was getting ready to graduate. And I remember just sitting there going like, this is not going to go well. And this is not going to go well for Bart. It's not. And it was 30 seconds of hell for Bart Gunn. And that punch, that knockout shot, is one of the scariest things I've ever seen in pro wrestling, because it looked like, I thought he broke his neck. I really did, because the way his head swiveled, I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. Fortunately, Bart's okay, but it didn't look good. And I like that they had Butterbean on there to kind of talk about it, because he was, it was one of those examples of a celebrity, interaction at a WrestleMania. One of the least successful ones, I would say. There are times where it works really, really well, and times where it doesn't work so well. And this was one where it didn't work because it just made one of their wrestlers look absolutely horrible. And any goodwill that Bart could have gotten from the Brawl for All tournament got flushed down the drain. And I love that they brought up that there was heat because he won the tournament and knocked out Dr. Death. I fully believe that there was some of that going on. He won the tournament when he... I don't know if it was Dr. Death specifically, but it was... It was, you won something that you were not supposed to win and you fucked up our plans. But I'm like, if you have plans, make it work. Come on, this is common sense, guys. And it's even worse, now that I think about it, it's a 2-month-long tournament. Like, guys need, like, months and months to prepare for one fight. And they're having to do it with no prep time, have one fight, and then get ready in a couple of weeks to do it again, assuming they win. And I'm like, oh my god, that's insane. That's insane. And it felt like a competition devised by people that don't understand how sports work. Like real, actual sports work. And that's pretty much how the Brawl for All played out. But yeah, I was glad that they touched up on the Butterbean Bart Gunn thing. Overall, a very well put together episode. I don't think it's as... maybe not as interesting or as emotionally resonant as the Benoit episode, and not as nightmare fuel inducing as the New Jack episode, but for a, kind of a different take on one of the more notorious things that come out of the Attitude Era. I thought it was very well done and were very well put together, and they got most of the people I would have wanted interviewed for this thing, so that was nice as well. And I think venturing into kind of ideas that were booked as part of the series, because up until this point it's been about things that were kind of going on behind the scenes, or when things go horribly, horribly wrong with one of the workers or something, as we'll see next week with the Jimmy Snuka story. It kind of opens the door for Dark Side of the Ring. It's like, well, if they can start covering angles and like storyline ideas, I mean, what does that open the door up for? What other different things could they potentially do with that? So I don't know. I'm sure the producers working on the show have already thought about it. So we'll see how it all plays out. But next week we've got the Jimmy Snuka episode, which I am really interested in that one because, and it all comes from a shoot interview that I saw with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, where he mentioned something about how famously he got caught in the car one night, got pulled over with Iron Sheik. He was feuding with him at the time. and they got caught with weed. And it's one of those things that, like, one of those kayfabe destroying, ruining, exposing the business type of deals that kind of became infamous. And Hacksaw said on this shoot, it's like, people remind me of that all the time. I got caught in a car with Iron Sheik with pot. Jimmy Snuka killed a girl, and nobody remembers it. And I think that's an interesting point. Why did the Jimmy Snuka story kind of get swept under the rug so quickly? And it wasn't until like the last couple like the last year, I think, before he died, where people even started to talk about it or bring it up. So I think it's an episode that's ripe for covering, and because I personally have never gotten the full story on that or what all the details are. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out and how bad Jimmy Snuka looks by the time it's over. But in any case, that concludes this review of Dark Side of the Ring. I thought it was another very good episode on a very interesting subject that I wouldn't have expected from this show, but I thought they covered it very, very well. And thumbs up for this one as well. So that is all I have for you in this video. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the little bell icon down below so you get notified when I post new videos. And you can follow me on Twitter. The link is in the description. So that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody. I will have more videos. I'll probably have another video up later this week. We'll see how it goes. But until then, later, everybody.